All right, welcome everybody to Never, Never, Never Give Up. This is a presentation by M.A. Nichols. A couple announcements before we get started. We remember that the chat is in the Discord for the C.S. Lewis channel. There will be a Q&A time at the end, so any questions that you have, just go ahead and throw in the chat, and I will feed those to M.A. Nichols at the end of the presentation. And we'll go ahead and get started.
Welcome to Never, Never, Never Give Up. My name is Melanie Nichols, and I publish under my initials, M.A. Nichols. And I'm guessing you're here because you have some literary goal you want to achieve. Maybe it's you want to get published, or maybe you want to finish your first novel. Maybe you want to be a full-time author. Maybe it's all of the above. But you have this voice in your head, that annoying inner critic that keeps telling you you're not good enough, your books aren't good enough, and you need to give up. And I'm going to tell you right now, everyone struggles with this. This is not something that is unique to you. I am willing to bet that every author struggles with this on some level, and that is fairly universal. And the only difference between someone who's a successful published author and someone who isn't is that determination to fight past that inner critic, not give up, and keep trying. And so I'm excited to share with you some of my experiences that I've had as I've gone from that struggling writer to being a successful published author. I started writing in 2004, and I spent, it was 12 years from between 2004 and when I finally published in 2016. And I spent about 2 of those years was writing the first draft. The rest was rewriting and revising and rewriting and revising. I literally threw that book out 7 times and rewrote it. And not counting the countless edits and revisions that were made in between those. They say that it takes 1 million words to be a good writer, and I'm pretty sure I put 1 million words into that book over the course of its life. And I was just wrapped around the axle because I was just convinced I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just take the plunge. And I had to learn to fight through that inner critic, push past it, and take the plunge and hit publish. And I can tell you right now, it's not been an easy road. It's taken me multiple years, a lot of failed attempts at books, a lot of successes, a lot of failures, but I am getting closer and closer to being able to quit my day job and be a full-time author, something that I have dreamed about for years. And I fully believe that a lot of that is the fact that I refused to give up, that I kept trying and I kept pushing forward. So I'm really excited to share with you some of my experiences and how I learned how to push past that inner critic. Because if you listen to it and you give that critic power over you, you will never, ever get to that finish line. Now, the poor inner critic does get a rather bad rap. People talk about needing to silence your inner critic and as though we need to get rid of it altogether. And the truth is that your inner critic is an important part of the creative process. It is what's going to help push you to do new things. It's going to help you to find the flaws in your stories. It's an important and integral part of your creative development. And so eradicating it is not the option. It isn't something you should really be striving for. What you really need to do is learn how to understand your inner critic and develop a healthy relationship with it. Now, the way I've been able to do that is first spend some time understanding what is your inner critic and why does it do what it does. And look at yourself, do some introspection, spend some time really thinking, especially when you're in the midst of a bout with your inner critic. Like when it rears its ugly head, take some time to think about it. Like, what is it that's triggering that inner critic? What is it that it's telling you? As you do that, you can start to see patterns emerge that will help you understand better when your inner critic is going to show up. Because as I've done this, I have certainly come to see that there are certain times in my writing process that the inner critic is always going to show up. Whenever I'm writing my first draft of when I hit the second act, when I'm in the middle of my book, it will start rearing its head, telling me this is crap. Oh, what are you thinking? It drags me down. It makes writing a slog, and it is really hard for me. And the first few times that this happened, it was really painful trying to get through it. And now, as I've come to understand that, you know what, this is just something that happens every time, it is a lot easier to look at it and say, no, the fact that my inner critic is showing up right now doesn't mean that what I'm writing is bad. It just means that I'm in the second act. And that's for some reason when my inner critic likes to show up. Or for example, to me, outlining is really difficult. It's something I need to do as part of my process, but it can be like pulling teeth as I'm trying to figure out what the story is for my book. And I have a friend that is also a writer, and I often vent to her about the various things that I'm going through with my projects. And it was a book or two ago that I was venting to her about my outline and just saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I've got the wrong book. Clearly, I'm not coming up with anything. I'm stuck, but I can't come up with any other ideas. And I was just basically like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And maybe I just need to throw in the towel. And she stopped me. She goes, Melanie, this is just what you always do. And I was like, what? She's like, every time we talk about your outline, you were sitting there freaking out about how it's terrible. And I got thinking and realized, oh my gosh, you're right. And so now that I understand that it is something that is just going to show up when I outline and when I write, and I've started seeing those patterns throughout my writing process, that it makes it a lot easier for me to face it down and shove it to the side, because it's just gonna do it. It's gonna do it. I haven't figured out how to get it to stop, but still working on that part. But I understand why it's coming up, and it makes it easier to be able to deal with it. Also, you need to look at the actual fears it's dredging up and try to understand those fears. Specifically, are they rational? And what I mean by rational is basically, are they based in reality? Because honestly, a lot of times they're not. For example, when your fears are telling you that you stink and you need to give up because you'll never be any good, that is not a rational fear, because nobody is born a great writer. Nobody just is divinely appointed to be the best writer ever. I mean, there are prodigies, sure, but most people are not in that bracket. Most people, it's something they learn and develop, and it's something that you can learn and develop. So feeling like you can't do it, that there's no possible way, that's not a rational fear. That's not a rational doubt. It is not always easy to tell what's rational and what isn't. It is something that takes a lot of, frankly, just experience. And as you come to understand you and your inner critic a little bit better, it's something that you'll be able to see more and more. But when you're gripped in that moment of doubt and discouragement, take some time to think about it. Like, what is it that's making me feel this way? Why do I think this way? Is this something that, is real? And sometimes being able to just analyze it and look at it and understand it a little bit better can help you overcome it. Then it can also help you embrace that inner critic. As I said, eradicating your inner critic is not something you necessarily want to do. And frankly, a lot of times becoming afraid of your fears, like being afraid of that inner critic and wanting to crush it, gives it more power. It's kind of like, Voldemort, using you're not using his name, it gives it more power. So when you try to avoid and run away from your inner critic, it's not necessarily, it's not empowering to you. It generally tends to give power to that fear. And so I found that once you understand that, you know what, these are going to, these fears, these doubts, they're going to crop up from time to time. It happens. And then you just have to embrace it and say, you know what, this is just part of my process. The more I've come to embrace that, you know what, I'm just going to have a rough time. Like, I just know second act is going to be hard for me. It's just something I've come to understand. I've come to embrace. And the only other option for me to do is just to not write, which is, to me, is not an option. So it's, if you understand and then embrace the fact that, you know what, this is just you. It's okay. And then when you do have fears that continue to bug you and continue to harass you, that's when it's time to take control. And the fact of the matter is, you can't have success without some risk. Sometimes you just have to take that leap. Sometimes you just have to put yourself out there, and you have to rein in those fears. You have to rein in that internal critic and just take the leap. And it is much easier to do that when you learn to understand and embrace that, the other aspects of your inner critic. But then it definitely comes time when you just have to go for it. Now, of course, it's not as easy as just saying, control your inner critic. Just do it. I would not be that flippant to say that. It is not something that is easy to do. But I've definitely discovered some tricks of the trade and some things that have worked for me to help me be able to control my inner critic. And hopefully they'll be able to help you as well. First off, you have to just make the decision to move forward. As I mentioned, I spent 10 years writing and rewriting my book. And it wasn't until I finally made the decision to move forward that I was able to do it. And what happened basically was I had been stuck for so long. I was wrapped around the axle. I had no idea where I was going with this. I've just never felt like this was ever going to be done. And I realized I needed a kick in the butt. So I came down to my very first LTUE. Actually, it was LTUE February 2016. And which was actually a significant leap for me just doing that, because I live in Alaska. It's a bit of a schlep to go down to Utah. And I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And so it was something that was that in and of itself was a major leap. But I took it, I went for it, thought, this is it, I need something. And so I went down there, and I was so inspired by the conference. I mean, you know how it is. You go to all these classes and you just get so pumped up. And I made the decision right then and there. And I said, okay, mid-September, second Tuesday in September, I am going to publish, no matter what. And it was terrifying. It was hard. It was excruciating. When I say make the decision to move forward, I don't mean that in a flippant way. It's not an easy thing to do, but you just have to do it. Make that decision. Set a deadline for yourself. Set an actionable goal and make the decision to move forward. Because if you just keep waiting for your book to be finished, or your whatever it is that's holding you up, if you just wait for that to be perfect and then you're going to move forward, you're never going to do it. So you need to make the decision and go for it. Something else I have learned is don't judge your first draft. Again, this is not easy advice to take. I didn't say it was easy. It's not. But this is something that I really, really work hard on doing. As I mentioned, I really struggle with the first draft. To me, editing is fun. I love editing. Give me editing any day of the week. It's so much easier to make words nice than to come up with the words in the first place. And I have just learned that I spend way too much time judging if my book is good or bad. And that's what really hangs me up. In fact, honestly, I don't believe that writer's block really exists. What it really is that you have words in your head. You know, when you're sitting there and you don't know what to write, you have words in your head. They're there. You're thinking things. The thing is that they're not good enough. That's what always happens with me is I sit there and stare at the screen and I come up with an idea. Oh, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. And I get wrapped around the axle wanting the perfect scenario, the perfect words. And I have learned to stop doing that. Give yourself permission to write crap. It's okay. That's the point of editing, is so that you can make those crappy words good again. And so one of the things that I do is I do not edit while I'm writing. I may edit the stuff that I'm looking at right in front of my face, but I don't go back. I don't look at what I've written previously. I don't touch it at all. And if I have an idea for something that I feel like, oh, this needs to change, I actually have a Word document that I keep on my computer that I call my to change file. And I take very detailed notes of everything I feel needs to improve or change, or whether it's scenes, maybe it's dialogue, something, whatever it is, I write it all down. And I can tell you, it's very easy when you're in the moment to think that something is bad and needs to get fixed. But then when you actually see the whole book together as a whole, as a complete story, you realize, oh, wait, no, actually, that doesn't work. Or, oh, actually, my original idea was the right move to make. And it's very easy to doubt yourself and second guess yourself. And so I like writing it all down, because when I write it all down, it gives me some time to step away from that self-doubt and that inner critic and look at it when I'm not in the middle of the inner critic mode. And when my book is all complete, and then I add those changes, then I make those shifts in my book. And honestly, I usually end up with like 3 pages worth of notes, just like a bullet point list of everything I need to change. And I would say maybe a third of it ever gets actually put into the book, because there's so often that while I'm in the middle of that inner critic mode, I think, oh, no, I need to change this. I need to change that. I need to change this. I need to change that. And then once I'm done, I see the whole thing together and it's a completely different picture. So don't judge your first draft. Don't sit there allowing your inner critic to think, oh, this isn't good, I need to change it. Or frankly, if I'm sitting there staring at a computer screen and I'm like, I don't like these words, I hate these words, I'll have that time. I have that all the time when I'll sit there like, I hate what I'm writing. I don't like it. I just keep writing. Put the words down. You can edit later. You're in some ways, I try to think of my first draft as really more like a really, really, really detailed outline, that it's not really my finished book. I try to think of it in that way, that this is just getting words on a page and I can pretty it up later. My second draft, that's my book, really. And so just keep that in mind. Try not to judge the words that you're putting down on the page, and give yourself permission to write crappy words. And then finally, don't dwell on the negative, which is kind of ironic since saying don't makes it a negative statement, but there you go. Or maybe, here we go, focus on the positive. But no, the thing is the more you think about how crappy you are, the more you're going to feel it. The more strength it gives to that negative thought, and the bigger and bigger and bigger it gets. And this is something that I have learned from very, very, very hard experience. And again, it's not something that's easy, but it is something you need to do. It's something that you need to work on, because the more you spend time in the negative headspace, the more negative you become. Versus the more you try to spend in the positive headspace, the more positive you become. And I have found that there are times when I just have to nip those thoughts in the bud and go for it, and just think about something good instead. Don't let myself wallow. Wallowing is the worst. I mean, I used to love it so much because I would spend so much time wallowing, and it's not helpful stuff. It is okay to take a moment to have a bad time, have a bad day. It's okay to feel sad and feel frustrated and feel down, but don't allow yourself to wallow in it, because when that happens, it takes control of your life and it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So focus on the positive rather than the negative. So as I said, I've really found that these 3 aspects of it really have helped me to develop a much better and healthier relationship with my inner critic. And I'll just tell you, I mean, all the things that I've talked about are not easy. They're not easy. And I hope that my blunt speaking isn't making it sound flippant or anything like that. But it's not necessarily easy, but it is something that does get easier with practice. I truly felt absolutely devastated and crippled by doubt and fear. And I still deal with it. It's something I still have to work with, and I still have to struggle with it from time to time. But it's gotten so much easier as I continue to fight against it, as I continue to understand myself better, embrace my flaws, and then push forward and control my inner critic rather than allowing it to control me. I have been able to achieve some incredible things. And I mean, I may not be the #1 bestseller on Amazon, but I am near close to being able to quit my day job and do this full time. I am selling, I've sold tens of thousands of books, and I'm continuing to grow a fan base and gaining the success that I'd hoped for. And so I've just learn from my mistakes. I just feel like I want to just reach out there and just hug you and be like, learn from my mistakes. Please do, because the absolute worst mistake I feel like I ever committed in my writing career was allowing my inner critic so much strength in my life and so much control over me. And I know that there's ways to do it, and I know you can do it too. Now, I'd like to talk about another aspect of overcoming the inner critic that may not seem like such a clear and obvious thing, and that's the relationship between arrogance and insecurity. We tend to think of them as being polar opposites of each other, but really they're very interconnected and more alike than you'd think. I read a psychology article a couple years ago that really opened my eyes to the role that arrogance and insecurity play with each other. And the way that it described it was, if you were to chart out your life on a graph, and where you have on one end of the scale is insecure, and the other side of the scale is arrogance, what you would find is that someone who is insecure might be tooling around, going along the side of the graph that is on insecure, but then there's something in their lives that would drag down and bump down all the way to the other side on arrogance and then back. So this idea that basically if you are someone who's extremely insecure, that there is going to be an aspect of your life that falls on the complete arrogant side of the scale. And you may be insecure about everything else, but you have at least one aspect of your life that is equally arrogant and kind of balances it out. And the same thing can be said of someone who is arrogant. They may be arrogant about most things, but they're going to fall onto the insecure side of the graph on at least one or two things to balance that out. And the idea of confidence really is the idea that confidence is how close can you get to the middle of that graph, rather than jumping back and forth between insecurity and arrogance. The more confident you are, the less and less you're going to bounce back and forth between those two things. And that may sound a little strange, and you might even be looking at yourself and saying, well, I don't really think I'm arrogant about anything. I might have some insecurities, but honestly, when I read this article, I immediately shot to the thoughts of my high school and college years. Like I mentioned, I was not a big fan of myself. I hated myself. I really did. I had extremely low self-esteem, and I thought I was worthless, except when it came to music. I was a pianist, and well, I still am. I can still play the piano. I had studied piano for a very long time, and I did have a talent for it. Well, and I still do have a talent. I have a talent for it. And at the time, I clung to that arrogance, that belief that I am so great at piano, and it was like it was a way to give my life meaning and to balance out my worth and give me some reason that I am on this planet and give me something to cling to keep me from hating every aspect of myself. And the more insecure I was, the more arrogant I was about that aspect of myself. And there is a really great quote that I stumbled across that I thought would share that really illustrates this. And it says, arrogance really comes from insecurity. And in the end, our feelings that we are bigger than others is really the flip side of our feeling that we are smaller than others. That's by Desmond Tutu. And so, if you want to deal with your insecurities, you also have to deal with the arrogances. There are aspects of your life that you have an overinflated ego about. And honestly, I see this all the time with newbie writers, that they are convinced that their book needs more work. They always are, that they're eternal working on it. And yet at the same time, when you talk to them about their story, they believe that story is the best thing that anyone has ever written. In fact, I honestly believe that writers as a whole, we are insecure narcissists because we bounce back and forth between that belief that what we are doing is profound and beautiful and wonderful, and that we're going to be the next big name in writing, and we're going to sell millions of books and be super rich and famous. And we often have that feeling that our book is the next great American novel. And yet, at the same time, we're also battling crippling insecurity. And the reality is that neither of those things are true. We're never as bad as we think we are, and we're never as good as we think we are either. And so if you want to deal with those insecurities, if you want to deal with that inner critic and those doubts and fears that you have in your life, you also have to address those areas of your life that you have an overinflated ego about. You can't just fix one side of the equation. You have to fix both. And this is something that I really firmly believe in because the better I've been about letting go of my ego and pride, the easier it has been to deal with the downsides of the failures that I've had. And frankly, the more arrogant I am about my successes, the harder it is when I fall later. Because you will. Nobody has a straight upshot of a career. Even those who are successful have setbacks and have failures. So the trick is you want to get you to the confident level. That's what you really want. And you want to be able to do that by really understanding yourself better. And I feel like the best thing that you can do is to be honest about your skill. You need to look at yourself and really be honest about who you are. We have this weird idea that if you are humble, that you're like self-deprecating and that you are you can't take a compliment and that you're a doormat or something. But that's not what humility is. And confidence isn't about comparing ourselves to others or thinking we're better than others or having an unrealistic belief in ourselves. Like it seems like nowadays when we talk about being confident and building up someone's confidence, we ply them with lies like, oh, you're so perfect, that was so wonderful, and oh my gosh, that was perfect, blah, 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 and drowning them in compliments, rather than saying, you did do really good because of X, Y, and Z, but you know what? Let's also talk about A, B, and C, because this needs to be better as well, and being honest and really evaluating things as they are. And the more honest you are, the more confident you will become, because confidence isn't about devaluing yourself or overinflating yourself. It's about knowing who you are and loving that imperfect being that you are and embracing the fact that I'm getting better. I can improve, but I'm not perfect. But at the same time, look at the ways that I'm good and look at the ways that I can improve on. And it's embracing that whole part of yourself, not just building up one side of your ego. And I mean, this is something I really truly have seen a lot of. It is something that like I said, our society nowadays wants to give everyone that participation trophy and the pat on the back and say that this is how we build up your self-esteem by giving you accolades and awards for things that in your heart that what you did really wasn't the best, or you're not really the best. But lying to yourself and deceiving yourself only feeds into that arrogance and insecurity. So you really need to embrace and be honest. There's nothing wrong with being an average person. That may sound weird because everyone wants to be extraordinary. Everyone wants to be above average. But I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm sorry if this comes across harsh, but you are probably not going to be the next J.K. Rowling or Brandon Sanderson. Those people are outliers. The chances of that happening aren't great. Maybe you could be, maybe, but likely not. There are millions of books out there, and very few of them are bestsellers. But you know what? It doesn't matter. That's the secret of it. It doesn't matter. I have never had a best-selling book. Never. I've never. No, I don't even come close to being one of the top names in my category or my genre. But I still do fine. I'm a strong mid-list author. What's wrong with that? Okay. I make money. I just, in December, I had my first 5-figure gross income month. I mean, that is not bestseller material, but man, I can quit my day job with that. I don't care. The thing is that people want to be the best, and that's a great thing in the fact that it pushes you to be better. But be honest with who you are. It's okay. You don't have to be the best. Your books don't have to be the next great American novel. They probably won't be. But that doesn't mean that they're not worth reading. That doesn't mean that they're not worth publishing. That doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who are going to be your fans and who are going to want to pay you to write more books. So really what you need to do is just embrace the fact that, you know what? You're not as bad as you think you are. You're not as good as you think you are. Just embrace that lovable, flawed you. So hopefully something that I've said has helped you or has given you ideas of how you can overcome that inner critic and push past it and keep going. Because I want to tell you, don't give up. Never, never, never give up. You know why? Because as much as we like to think of success as being contingent on having the perfect book or being this incredibly talented writer or some magic form of pixie dust or any number of things, the truth is success really isn't about talent. It's about hard work and persistence. I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Dawson, but he is one of the premier indie authors right now. The guy makes 7 figures a year. I mean, he's a multimillionaire every year. He's one of the top authors, period, on Amazon. And I have heard him say this many times, both on podcasts, in person, at conferences and such. He is very fond of saying this, that it is not about talent. It's not about your ability. What it really is about is if you're willing to work hard and keep at it. If you want to be successful in this industry, you just have to work for it. You just need to keep trying. You just can't give up. And I'm going to tell you right now that your first book is not going to do well. It probably won't. There are rare occasions that happens, but first books don't tend to do well. Sometimes it's not your second book or your third or your fourth. For me, it was my 6th book. I wrote 5 novels. Published 5 novels. I spent about 2.5 years spinning my wheels. Even after I finally took that plunge and got over my inner critic and, well, harnessed it enough to be able to get through and publish, I put out my first book, fully expecting it to do well because I was in love with it. I thought it was a great novel. And I got all excited because that first month I sold 100 copies, which It's actually pretty good for a newbie author with first book out with no name recognition. That wasn't bad. There's a lot of people who don't. Heck, I have other books who never sold 100 copies. But it was mostly to my friends and family, though, and mostly to their friends and family, because my friends and family are very sweet and spent a lot of time marketing on my behalf. And I thought, this is a great start. It wasn't what I was hoping for, but that's okay. This is just a stepping stone. And then month 2 came along and nothing. I had nothing. I kept trying and trying and trying to market it, and it just wouldn't take off. And so I just kept my head down and kept trying to write the next book. So I put out another book, and I put out another book, and I put out another book, and I spent 2.5 years publishing 5 different novels, all of which failed miserably. And I just kept saying, okay, I have to keep trying. I have to keep trying because I know I can do this. It's not about how good you are. It's not about talent. You just keep writing and trying new things and experimenting, and you never know what's going to take off. And I'd heard all of that. I'd taken it to heart, and so I kept working. And then one day I decided on a lark to write a historical romance. And I published it and put it out there. And that was the first book. My book number 6 was the first one to take off. And of course now I write historical romance instead of fantasy, because apparently that's where I'm supposed to be. Like, my problem wasn't that my books weren't good enough. I was just in the wrong genre. And that's the thing is you never know what's going to work for you. Likely you're going to make tons of mistakes. You're going to have lots of failures. But you know what? If you keep trying, something will work out. I firmly believe that. Those who are successful are the ones who just don't give up. So don't give up. Never, never, never give up. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. And as I was preparing this presentation, I was watching The Good Place. And if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. It's amazing. But there's a character, Jason Mendoza, who says one of the most delightful quotes that I thought you guys absolutely needed to hear. His dream was he wanted to be a DJ. And someone was giving a hard time about being a failed DJ. And his response was to put on a big old smile and say, I wasn't a failed DJ, I was pre-successful. So keep that in mind. You're not failed authors. Even if you're not selling books, even if you haven't published yet, you're not failed. You're pre-successful. Keep working, because you're just pre-successful. And the only way you get from pre-successful to successful is to keep on trying. And remember, one final word of wisdom from Jason Mendoza: be nicer to yourself. Your books are not as bad as you think they are. If you start struggling with feeling like you're not good enough, be nicer to yourself. Keep trying, keep working. Honestly, I just feel like I want to just, whenever I talk to people who are struggling like this, and I talk to a lot of people at conferences like this that are looking for that ray of hope, and they want to be successful authors, and they just feel discouraged. And I just want to shower them with rainbow and sunshines and just tell them, just keep working. I understand. It is rough. It is hard. And even though I have success now, I still have failures. My last book, I just published it, and it's a failure. I don't know why people don't like it, but people do not like it. It's well received. It's got good reviews, but people will not buy it. And I don't know why. And I will admit, that is a hard pill to swallow, but I have to dust myself off and get up and go again, because the only other option is to give up. And I don't want to give up, because I love writing. I love publishing. And if you love this, if you really want to do this, keep working. You're pre-successful. Just be nice to yourself. And I hope that something I was able to say, something I said was able to help you and lift you a little bit, because I truly believe that you're not a failure. You're just pre-successful. Keep working and never, never, never give up. So I just want to say thank you all for coming. And I do have a few minutes for questions if you'd like to ask them. If you don't feel comfortable or want to talk privately, feel free to reach out to me. My email and website are up there. NicholsMelanieA@gmail.com is my email, or reach out to me at my website, ma-nichols.com. And I'd be more than willing to chat with you. I absolutely love helping out other authors. So please feel free to reach out to me. And thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We've got a couple questions from our audience today. SCW Korsgaard asks, how do you break out of the usual, just keep rewriting the same section loop?
Oh gosh, that's a tricky one, and I think it's something that everyone struggles with continually. The thing that helps me is stopping and getting some distance. If I'm struggling with the passage, and I'm stuck in that loop, like in the moment, pause it, move on, and come back to it later. That's one of the reasons why I don't like to edit when I'm in my first draft, is because it's so easy to get stuck in that loop during the first draft. But feel free to move on, come back to it later. If it is a passage that continues to bug you over and over again, I tend to then send it to someone, get some feedback. If your internal critic is giving you mixed signals and you're not sure what to do, that's a great time for a critique and to get a friend of yours, or it doesn't have to be a writer or anything, just someone else to read it and give you some feedback on whether or not it is good. Because a lot of times I think it's not as bad as we think it is. We just get nitpicky. And if you find yourself moving, commas here and there, doing little nitpicky things and changing it back and forth, it's just time to walk away. Sometimes you just have to pull the cord and walk away.
Excellent. So Curie asks, any tips for how to make sure you are being honest with yourself?
Oh, it is so easy to lie to ourselves. I would say that listen, is what you're telling yourself realistic? That is one of the things I like to ask myself is am I being realistic with my expectations? Am I being conservative? Like, the more extreme your thoughts are, the less likely they're true. So that's one of my telltale signs is if I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is terrible, I know I'm not being honest with myself, because it's probably not as bad as I think it is. And especially if I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm the worst writer ever, it's that's not likely a logical thought. And again, critique, asking outside sources for help, talking to other people, especially if you can find get friends around you and support that are writers who understand the struggle that you're going through. Get their feedback, ask people. That generally helps me. And then frankly, a lot of it is just experience, that as you come to understand your inner critic, it becomes easier to tell when you're being honest with yourself and when you're trying to fudge things.
Thank you so much. Kathy Davidson asks, are there any rituals you do to get through the doubts when you plot or get the second act?
When I'm hitting in those really bad moments, I wouldn't say I have rituals per se, but to me, I'm a firm believer I don't think of it as writer's block. I have stopped using the terms writer's block, or at least I try not to, because I feel like it gives writer's block this power as if it is something outside of my control. More often than not, writer's block is just, I'm not feeling it. I'm just not wanting to work, or any number of things. I'm frustrated with what I'm doing. I'm in the middle of my second act slump or something, and I don't want to write. So I call it writer's block and write it off and say, well, that's beyond my control. So one of the things I've learned to do is stop thinking of it as something outside of my control, and allowing it to just dictate to me. And so I would say that's probably the number one thing I do. The other one is sometimes you just got to put your butt in the in the chair and hands on the keyboard, and there's no amount of trickery or nudging yourself forward other than, if I don't write, I don't get paid. And that, I will tell you, is a massive incentive for me. If I don't write, I don't make money. And so I can't allow myself to do that. So I don't have a whole lot of tricks or habits that I do other than trying to change my mindset and just realize that, sometimes you're not going to like writing. It doesn't mean your writing's bad. It just, sometimes you don't feel like working. That happens.
Excellent. Jennifer Hart asks, what's your self-talk like in creating routine and writing discipline?
I'm assuming it's talking about kind of like what I tell myself. And I would say a lot of what I said previously, which is, I know what my goals are. I know that my goal is that I want to be a full-time writer. I want to make money off of this. I want to make as much money as I can off of this. And I want to write tons of books. And I want to be able to quit my job. I want to be able to be a writer. That is my goal. And so when I hit moments that are contrary to that, I have to just remind myself, this is my goal. There are times when, even though as much as I love writing, I feel like quitting because don't get me started on marketing. And there's just so many headaches that come with being a writer. Just like, every job has downsides. And so for me, I come back, I keep focused on the fact that, though, I love this, even though there's things I hate about it, even though there's times that I hate it. I love this. And the only way I'm going to get to do this is if I keep moving forward and I keep pushing forward. And again, it's always good to have outside forces. I can't tell you how many times that my family and friends have picked me up off the ground and dusted me off and helped me to get back to work after I've had a hard blow or something that I've struggled with not wanting to continue, that they dust me off and they help me remember as well.
Thank you. Kuro Darkness asks, what if you love your first book idea so much and know you will ruin it when you write it as your first book? What do you do?
My knee-jerk reaction would be to say, go for it. Just because, honestly, I feel like the first book is the hardest one to write. And whatever gets you writing that first book and finishing that first book, even if it's a total dud, even if you end up totally ruining it on the first draft, I can tell you right now, my first draft of my first book was terrible and was nowhere near what I had wanted it to be. But that's what revisions are for. That's what rewriting is for. But if you are passionate about that project, go for it. And see what comes out of it. And frankly, there's a lot of times too where I've had an idea for a project that I absolutely love, but then once I actually get in there, it changes and shifts into something that I hadn't planned. And if I hadn't just gone for it, I wouldn't have discovered that. So anyway, I would just say mainly, especially if it's your first book, write what you are passionate about, just to at least get out that first book. And then move from there. And like I said, rewrites. And even if you have to throw out the whole thing and rewrite your entire book, you learn so much from finishing a project, from doing a complete project, and rather than starting and stopping, which a lot of eternal writers do. Actually finishing the project and going from beginning to end, and then being able to go back and look at it and edit it and everything. And even if you throw it out, it's still an incredible learning experience.